What is up, guys? Phaedo 82 coming at you with another edition of Rust Cribs, in which we take a look at some of the more noteworthy base designs during the past wipe cycle on the US Rustopia server. Right off the bat, we're taking a look at an absolutely stunning water base. It has multiple layers to it. It has an outer wall with two ledges that are going to help prevent against ladders and help soak up some rockets. The inner part of the base has those ledges as well. That's something you always want to employ in your base designs. In addition, guys, make note that it is built in the Arctic biome, which gives you an added layer of protection and another barrier to entry for the raiders. The water gets a little bit colder out there, and it's a good place to build. This is an absolutely beautiful water base design. It really is amazing. I'm glad that it lasted to the end of the wipe cycle to be able to be filmed. And the way that the towers are positioned are beautiful because they give the defenders vantage points outside the base and then inside the base as well. There's those shooting ports on the inside of the base, and those accompanied with the towers really make it a shooting gallery if the raiders get inside. You always want to think about defending the inside of your base as well as the outside. And alright guys, here's where the episode gets a little bit different than past editions of Rust Cribs. So I was out of town this week for work, I was out of town at training, and I wasn't able to record as much as I normally would have. So by the time I got back into town, I loaded up the computer and most bases had been blown up, and it was right before the patch was being applied. So this is the footage that I was able to get. It doesn't diminish or take away from these bases. They would have been in the video anyways. They're absolutely beautiful. But instead of talking about the individual bases, I thought we'd use this episode and just kind of talk about how building is in Rust, how it's evolved, where it might be going, and just have sort of a dialogue about that. We can talk about it in the comments as well, but absolutely enjoy this footage. These are some amazing bases from some groups on Rustopia, and you know, some really stunning achievements. Alright guys, let's go ahead and just talk about building in Rust. So I've been a Rust player since Legacy. I bought the game the second week it came out, and building is different now than it used to be, but the core concept is really the same. You want to be able to have secure loot, and you want to be able to have a base that can be defended against. Some of the things we're seeing now on bigger servers like Rustopia are that bigger groups are coming together, and I think that's born out of sort of necessity, and you know, smaller groups are finding that they get raided easier if it's just them on their own, so they're trying to form alliances, but we're now seeing people build together in these bigger compounds. That's not a bad idea. I mean, to have sort of a communal thing going, it allows you to have eyes on your base at different times, you know, so people can scare away raiders, maybe help defend against a raid or alert you to a raid. So that's an interesting concept. But in terms of the way that a solo player would build versus somebody who's going to build inside a compound, you know, the similarities are really the same. I mean, you want to have a base that's going to be as secure as possible. So you want to layer it up. You want to, obviously, I think if you're a solo player, have a smaller footprint, more of a lower profile. But you still want to, you know, honeycomb your base, put ledges on it, do things that are going to make it really difficult to gain access to, because you don't want to lose your hard work, whether you're a solo player or whether you're part of one of these large groups. So how has building changed in Rust? Well, it's interesting because every patch brings with it tweaks to Rust. So after the introduction of ladders, we now see all of these buildings with these ledges that we didn't see before, and those are to help mitigate against the ladders and try to make them as least impactful as they could be. Also, something that, you know, I'm seeing more of now after seeing some of the bigger raid cams like World War Rustopia is people are building, you know, flank bases, which are bases that are either inside or outside your compound that are high towers with good vantage points that allow you to get raiders as they're coming in from a different angle. And that's really important to do. When you're building a base, guys, you always want to think about it in terms of how it could be raided or how it will be raided, and build around that with that in mind. Putting your traps strategically and using choke points as best you can, whether they're man-made, player-made choke points on your own, or whether they're choke points with the natural landscape. Anytime you can integrate your base into the landscape, you're going to want to go ahead and do that. We've seen in videos of raids where landscapes play huge roles in the outcome of a battle. So keep that in mind when you're building. Certain landscapes, certain biomes are going to bring with it added benefits. Some have drawbacks that are inherent to them, but keep that in mind when you're thinking of building a base. As always, when building a base, you want to think about where you're positioning your loot rooms, and don't leave all your loot in the same spot, guys. Have multiple buildings so it's keeping the raiders guessing as to where the loot might be.
You know, food. You gotta heal up for your next fight, and maybe put some heart in it next time. It's not bad, you know? But it doesn't work. Whatever it takes to win that fight, dude. You want to be the champion. Endless amounts of prizes, glory in the battlefield.
And to sum it up, guys, building in Rust is really the same now as it was in the days of Legacy, in that the core concept is the same. It's about mitigating against loss, lessening the impact, and trying to build smart and build strategically. Those concepts remain the same, whether you're a large group or a small group or even a solo player if you want to go ahead and be a lone wolf. In terms of where building's going, I think you're going to be seeing more large compounds developing on servers out of necessity, with things being introduced in the game like power, electricity, the different quarries. People are having to work together in order to protect their stuff, and that's an interesting concept. I don't think Rust was ever meant to be a game necessarily played by a bunch of people solo or necessarily in small groups, so it's good to see bigger groups coming together. With that being said, you always want that balance, so you don't want to see too many big groups coming together. And I actually saw recently a cool post on the Rustopia forums where some groups talked about breaking up their large groups just to keep it alive and keep the mix more interesting. Alright guys, I know this was a little bit different than a normal episode of Rust Cribs. Again, I apologize for missing some footage last week. We'll certainly hit the ground running this week. As always guys, have a great weekend. Phaedo82, peace.